In Daniel chapter 12, verse 9, it reads like this from the King James Version. And he said, "Go your way." This is God talking to Daniel. He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end." So the words of the Bible, and specifically this prophecy of Daniel, was to be closed up. It was not to be understood until the time of the end. And I think before we're through tonight, we're going to identify that we're literally living in the time of the end, which all the prophets in the Old Testament and Jesus Christ himself in the New Testament came to confirm all of their prophecies. And therefore he wrote the book of Revelation, which identifies the very end of the age. Now when you back up to verse 4, notice what he says, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." So this does definitely identify the time in which we live today, where there's global traveling, where you can hop on an airplane in New York City, you can be in London, England, 5-6 hours, then you can hold meetings in the Middle East another 6 hours away. This has never happened before. Knowledge is increasing at a rate of every 2.5 years. It's doubling. Now this is knowledge of what's going on in the world, how to control the elements, computer sciences, technology. And so I believe that we can say that knowledge has increased, and this prophecy is literally jumping off the pages right into our face. And I think we should look and analyze all of Bible prophecy. But you see, Bible prophecy just simply gives a basic outline, and it states what's going to happen. But now if you want to know who is behind what is going to ultimately turn out to be the fulfillment of that prophecy, you have to look behind the scenes. You'll never find something by just looking at the Bible and saying, here's what it says. Look at verse 7. I'm going to drop all the way down into the middle of this, toward the end of it. It says, "And when he," this is God, "shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished." There is a holy people on the face of the earth today. And I want to tell you, it is not the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation is not the holy people that this is referring to. There are whole prophecies in the Bible stating that the United States and the British Commonwealth are going to be scattered. And it's when the scattering of these people take place, all these prophecies are going to be ending with the rise of the final world social system that is prophesied. Now, the book of Revelation goes hand in glove with the book of Daniel. When you turn to Revelation chapter 19, verse 11 through the rest of the chapter, you see someone entering the atmosphere of the earth. Verse 11, it's a white horse, and he that sat upon him is faithful and true, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. So we know that Jesus Christ is righteous, and it actually identifies who it is in verse 12. It says his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and the actual Greek word should be diadems, meaning the many offices of Jesus Christ, high priest, King of kings, Lord of lords. And so he has many offices. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And notice the next verse. This identifies who literally is coming into the atmosphere of the earth, who is intervening, and who is wearing these crowns. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Compare that with John chapter 1, verse 1 through 3, and verse 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he created everything, this personality, the Word. And in verse 14 it states that he, this Word, became flesh. And when you compare that with Matthew 1, verse 23, it shows very clearly that Jesus Christ became Emmanuel, which is God with us. So this is Jesus Christ who's entering the atmosphere of the earth. Verse 14, "And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean." These are the armies, and we're going to see who those armies are in just a minute. "And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations." Notice this is a plurality of nations, not just a single nation, but it's a plurality. "And he'll rule them with a rod of iron." And you can go on down and read the rest of this, but what I want to get to is verse 19. "And I saw the beast," and we're going to identify the beast in just a moment, "and the kings of the earth and their armies." Notice kings of the earth, this is plural, because the Bible reveals there's going to be a beast and 10 kingdoms. And those kingdoms are going to have a king ruling over them. So there's going to be at least 11 personalities involved in this. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gather together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and we've already identified that as Jesus Christ, and against his army. And you can look in Psalms 149 verses 4 to 9, and you're going to see who that army is. It's the saints of the living God. And the saints of Jesus Christ are going to have opportunity to return to this earth with him after being caught up by his angels. I'll refer you to Matthew chapter 24. After the tribulation of those days, then the angels will gather his elect, and then we're going to be apportioned our rulership. We're going to return to this earth with Jesus Christ, and we're going to have opportunity to take the beast and the 10 kings who are going to rule over these kingdoms, and we're going to bind them with fetters of iron. And it says this is going to be an honor that the saints of God are going to have. And so we should be looking forward to the time when we are going to straighten up the problems of this earth. And it's going to be once Jesus Christ returns, and not before that. So all we can do now is identify what is about to take place on the world scene, and it is happening. Revelation chapter 13. Well, we've already seen from Daniel that the books of prophecy were closed until the time of the end. Once the time of the end came, then Jesus Christ would start stripping away the seals of the book of Revelation, so that one event after another, the Christians are going to be able to identify them. We're going to be able to tell what is going to come in advance so that we can take warning. Now, chapter 13 of Revelation, verse 1, I stood upon the sand of the sea. And the sea here, if you want to turn to Revelation 17:15 and verify this, it just means humanity. All nations, languages, tongues, everyone on earth. It's a global government that's coming. He saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. And remember, we saw in Revelation 19, when Jesus comes, he takes the beast and he takes the kings, plural, and he's going to cast the beast into a lake of fire. Then drop down into verse 2, the last phrase. It tells where the power for this global government is going to come from. It's going to come from the dragon. Revelation 12:9 states very clearly that this dragon is Satan, that old serpent, Satan the devil. So there is a real Satan, even though he's invisible to you and I. But he's not invisible to giving power to anyone that will bow down and worship him. He offered it to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ refused him. And he said, I'll wait until the proper time and I'll replace you completely. Turn to Matthew 4, verses 1 to 11, and that'll describe that scene. Also Luke chapter 4. Then in verse 4 of Revelation 13, and it says, and they worship the dragon, that's Satan, but they're going to do it unknowingly, because there's going to be a deception that's going to be so great that it would literally fool Christians, the very elect, if they don't know better. And that's why I want to tell everybody that there is coming a deception, and it's going to be so vital that you understand it so that you won't get sucked into the worship of this beast and believe it's the Messiah. And this particular dragon gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast. So this is going to be a false Messiah. People are going to literally believe that this is the Christ, the Messiah. He's going to be the Savior. This is what people are going to believe. And he says, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? So from this verse, we see that there is going to be a worship of the beast. They're going to think he's the Messiah, the God prophesied in the Bible. Also, you see there's going to be a military apparatus where nobody can stand against this government and this leader of this government. Drop down into verse 7. And it was given unto him, the beast, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. This is martyrdom. I want to warn you, if you're a saint, prepare for the worst and then be surprised when God protects you through it. But some are going to have to be martyred. It says it, and I would not be a minister of Jesus Christ if I didn't say it exactly the way it reads. And power was given unto him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. The word all means all-inclusive, none excluded. This is going to be a world government, global. No one will be expelled from it. Everybody will be included in it. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him. There's going to be 4 things we've seen so far. There's going to be a global kingdom. It's going to have a military apparatus that's going to engulf the earth. No nation will step out of line when this global government's military apparatus is so great that they'll be fearful to rise up against it and rebel against it. Then we've seen there's going to be a religious system where everybody on the earth will be forced to worship this person as the Messiah, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And yet he's going to be a false Messiah because it's going to be Satan incarnate in this person, and he's giving him power. And then the fourth thing we saw is that it's going to be, a military apparatus. We're going to see the next part, the fourth one, right now. Drop down to verse 15 of the same chapter. Now there's another beast that's going to rise up. There's a world dictator, and everyone's going to worship this political man. But then in verse 11, there is another beast that rises out of the sea of humanity. This is a religious person. He speaks like a lamb, or he looks like a lamb, because he's religiously inclined. But he's going to speak like a dragon because he's of Satan. He's a false prophet, according to Revelation chapter 19. And Jesus Christ is going to take not only the beast, but the false prophet, cast them both alive into the lake of fire. Okay, he is going to exercise all the power of the political leader that's worshipped as God. Read 2 Thessalonians. He's going to exalt himself above everything that's worshipped. Therefore, he's going to claim to be God, and he's going to sit in the temple of God. Now, this religious figure is going to work miracles to deceive the world into believing that this is God. The religious figure is not going to be the one that's worshipped. Many churches believe that, but it says clearly the beast is the one to be worshipped, the political world leader. And then this second beast, the religious personality, is going to work miracles and deceive the rest of the world into worshiping the political leader. Now notice what this religious man is going to do in verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. So there's going to be an image. And we've written, and I believe firmly, that there's going to be a computer robot that's going to look exactly like this world dictator. And he's going to be programmed. And look what it's going to be able to do. That the image of the beast should both speak, and there is today technology where computers speak. They do. And notice what else. And cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. You're either going to accept this person as the Messiah or this image. And just think for a minute, a computer has no feelings. You simply program into that computer exactly what you want. If anyone will not take the next two verses called the mark of the beast, they will not accept the Messiah, this false Messiah, as God and worship him. This computer can say, this person should be killed. And it's very simple. He has no feelings. A computer can just speak and say this person should be killed. These four in that family should be eradicated. They are against the Messiah. And they can be executed. Look in verse 16. We're going to see they're also going to have an economic system that's going to be global. And he caused, this is the religious figure now, speaking in behalf of the political. And he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And then you read the next verse, and it talks about the number 666, and that's how it can be identified. I think what we should do, I've written many times in Newswatch magazine about Senior Scholastic magazine, September 20th, 1973, where it states very clearly the New World Order's economic system, where they're going to first of all assign every person on earth a number. Secondly, they're going to etch that into everybody's hand through laser beam tattoos, just like you see the universal product code on all your grocery items today. Thirdly, they're going to have this universal product code on all goods for buying and selling. When you go into a grocery store or any store to make a purchase, they simply run that computer marks over a scanner, then run your hand with which the lines represent various numbers, over the scanner, and it instantly transfers your money from your bank account to the store's account. Now this is what they have programmed, and when you read that no man can buy or sell, I want to challenge you. Find one place in the Bible where it says that the use of that mark was for anything other than buying and selling. There's only one phrase in the entire Bible that says what it's for. It's not for a religious service on a particular day of the week. It's not for anything other than buying and selling. And it's only going to be given to those who are loyal to the Messiah, the false Messiah, who are going to worship the beast and his image. And anyone who won't worship the beast and his image will be killed. Everyone else is going to be offered a number. And if you can't buy or sell, then you better prepare in some other way and also depend upon the true and the living God for supernatural protection. But what I want to ask is, how will our beloved America that we all live in, we've all had the freedom to live in, be merged into this one world government? How could it happen because we have such freedom in this country? How could anyone on earth who wishes to build a world government accomplish it overnight? I've heard religious organization after religious organization say, watch the European common market. It's going to just suddenly come up in a beast. That's going to be the beast power, and it's going to come up out of the sea of humanity, and it's going to just happen overnight. Now, I've got one question. How would that solve the problem for people in Africa? How can it say that nobody on the face of the earth is going to buy and sell unless they have this mark, if it's only going to be 10 nations in Europe? Well, I think we need to look a little further, and we need to understand that in Revelation 13 it says very clearly, all nations, languages, and tongues, none excepted. There is no exceptions. So I think what we need to do is start out, first of all, and explore just a little bit about the long-term planning that takes place. You cannot overthrow every government on the face of the earth overnight. You can't do it. It takes long-term secret planning behind closed doors, behind boardrooms, behind corporate boardrooms, in castles, yes, if those people are involved in a plot for world government. Think about the Middle Ages for just a minute. In the Middle Ages, you had a bought-out priesthood, a bought-out religion. Certain ultra-rich people on the continent of Europe paid off a priesthood. They kept people in total slavery and poverty through ignorance of religion. Now, what's going to happen in the world scene today? What happens if everybody on earth has to receive a mark for buying and selling? What happens if everybody has to have that mark because they're going to redistribute the wealth of the world? And they're going to give the people of Africa equal food with the people in North America. I think we need to read something that is very sobering. Have you noticed lately that more and more people are dependent upon the government? When you read the Constitution of the United States, we are free people, and the government is not supposed to interfere in business, period, religion, whatsoever. They're not even supposed to delve into any part of social welfare to people. All programs not specifically mentioned in the Constitution of the United States are reserved for the states and the individual. And yet today, it's big government, just like in the Soviet Union. Think about it. Do you know that in 1982, 71 million Americans actually paid income taxes, while 81 million took checks from the government? Did you realize that? What does that mean for America? We are a socialist welfare country. The only thing lacking is a dictator like the Soviet Union. All 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are in operation in the United States of America today. Executive orders have already been given and are law right now that if a supreme crisis comes along, the President of the United States can declare martial law and create a dictatorship. The current issue of Newswatch magazine lists every single one of them. And so if you want to pick up a copy when we're through, feel free. But we need to go just a little further. Have you noticed how people today just don't dress up as well as they used to. They dress down. Have you noticed how their cars are getting older than they used to? Used to, people would drive new cars every 2 or 3 years and trade it in, get a new car. Have you seen that the welfare state has been building up over the last 6 decades, and especially since Franklin Delano Roosevelt? Did anybody see on CNN, cable network news, several weeks ago on a Sunday morning, Barry Goldwater was being interviewed. And he said that America had better wake up, that we are a welfare socialistic state. And once a nation has over half of its people on a check handed out from the government, there is no return. There is no return. That nation has gone under to the socialist. What did I just read? In 1982, 71 million Americans paid taxes, and 81 million, over half, received checks from the government. If Barry Goldwater is correct, the United States of America will not last the 80s. It will become a socialist American republic. A loosely knit world order is what they're looking for. Well, let's go on just a little bit. But how do we know where all these things are leading us? All right, we realize that Ronald Reagan was passed into the presidency of the United States by the American people by a 76% consensus of the voting public. And yet most of his programs can't be realized at all. They consider, now those people who are around Ronald Reagan, all of the top leftist liberals in the Congress of the United States, and those who are not even in Congress, but they are the bureaucrats. They're not elected officials whatsoever, but they're there year after year after year. They write laws and introduce them by congressmen, and they're passed. Notice what's happening. They feel that we have got to be merged into a world government. They consider a nuclear war unthinkable, and I believe all of us do. Well, that's not all, but they see a clear alternative to a nuclear war in giving up the sovereignty of the United States as a nation and merging it into a loosely knit world socialistic government with the Soviet Union. In modern vernacular, it's called the New World Order. Anybody ever heard that phrase? Or the New Age movement? That's exactly what it is. The New World Order is the phrase used by such men as Kissinger, Rockefeller, and other men that are associated with them. Even a born-again Christian named Mr. Carter, who was our president a few years ago. Also, those in government in the United States, they are convinced that the Soviet Union have now surpassed us in nuclear missile power. And they believe that now, see, the program was that the Soviet Union would be set up as a front organization to scare the rest of the world into submitting to a world government. Then they would go to the masses of Asia. Then they would take all the countries like Africa and the Arabs surrounding the oil fields in the Middle East. Then they would come up through the underbelly of the United States through South and Central America. And by the time they had used the wealth of the United States, England, and Europe to accomplish all of that, then America, England, and Europe would fall into the hands of the socialists like an overripe apple. Look what's happening on the world scene today. Is it happening? All these programs were outlined years ago, before there was ever a Bolshevik revolution in 1917. Well, I think we can see that Cuba is in the hands of the Soviets. Nicaragua, El Salvador is about to fall. So we can see that Soviet submarines are actually going along the east and west coast of the United States of America right now. Submarines with nuclear missiles that can reach any strategic location in the United States. Not only that, within the last 30 days, Soviet reconnaissance flights have been going over Mexico. And the thing that they're saying is, within 18 months of January of 1984, from 18 months, somewhere in that period of time, Mexico will be a socialist country with Russian troops at the border of Arizona. Now, I'm just reporting to you what I receive across my desk. So I think we can see that from these things, The world is in trouble, and especially the United States of America. Also, our government officials fail to realize that the United Nations organization is totally dominated by the Soviets. Either one of two things happen. They either fail to realize that the United Nations organization is nothing but a communist front organization, or they deliberately are helping it, and they're a part of it. One of the two. Now, we've put out a whole magazine called Dismantling America for World Government, the United Nations organization, and it's documented with our own government documents, right out of the Congressional Record of the United States of America. An investigation into employees of the United Nations organization. We published it in November of 1983. And once you read it, there won't be any doubt in your mind with the documentation that the United Nations organization is a front organization for world government. And they're trying to get every nation on earth to go into it. They also fail to realize that the very charter of the United Nations was written by Alger Hiss, who was convicted as a Russian. He was a traitor to the United States of America and the United Nations organization. The charter was nearly a blueprint of the Soviet Constitution. Well, I think we need to realize that these things are reality. They've been going on for over 70 years right under our nose. Well, there are other things that are going on that you need to know about. The large tax-exempt corporations and foundations such as the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, ever since the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, have openly admitted that they're using their grant-making power, their money power and grants to various organizations, and I'll quote, to so alter life in these United States as to make possible a comfortable merger with the Soviet Union. Now, I'll just tell you how I feel about it. That's treason. And I know what's supposed to happen to people who commit treason according to the Constitution. They're to be tried, convicted, and put to death. But of course, when these very same people who are the power, money power people of the country, they control by buying off senators, representatives, then nothing's going to happen to them. You see, whoever controls the money system of a country controls absolutely that country. It's just a fact of history. During recent decades, we've seen that our life in America has been totally altered, and you older people in the room can see it more than us middle-aged in our 40s and younger. It has been totally altered economically, politically, educationally, culturally, and morally. I think we can see every bit of it if we have our eyes open at all. The free enterprise system, where government left hands off business, is evaporated. There's no such thing as free enterprise in the United States anymore. Government has such red tape on businesses, they can't make profits anymore. They just can't do it. They strangled them. They're creating monopolies, huge monopolies, and they're doing it. And you can prove it. Well, these are just a few things. Now, just think for a minute. The United States of America is the greatest nation that has ever existed. At one time, we produced over 50% of all the world's goods, period. I don't care what other nation it was, we produced and consumed over 50% of the world's goods. Everywhere we went, every nation we became involved with was blessed because of us. Now, starting after World War II, the United Nations organization was founded at the closing of World War II in 1945. Suddenly, we began becoming involved in no-win wars. Here is the greatest military apparatus on earth and can't even defeat a little North Korean group of people that probably can't even read on a second grade level. All right, we came out of Korea at a stalemate. 50,000 of our young people killed. Then all of a sudden we're embroiled in Vietnam, where 1,000 more are killed. We can't even win in Vietnam, and yet we have enough military might where we could blow up 40 Earths, where there would be no green vegetation left, no human life, no animal life. Not even the amoeba in the sea would survive. And yet we can't even defeat little tiny Vietnam. Do you know why? Because we became involved in what's called a United Nations organization, which was the specific organization called for over 120 years ago, through which there would be formulated a world government. They say that since we are a peacekeeping apparatus, this is the United Nations military, the United States had to follow orders of the head of the military in the United Nations organization. After World War II, when we had the treaties that ended World War II, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin all met. They agreed among themselves, along with the French delegation, that the head of the military in the United Nations organization would always be a communist. Always, no exception. I have the names of every one of them since that organization started. 11 out of the 12 were Soviet communist, and the only exception was a Yugoslavian communist. Now, you stop and figure, the communist aggression in North Korea, in Vietnam, who is heading up the delegation for the peacekeeping armies? Of course, a communist. So he's going to tell his communist allies every move we're going to make. So we go bomb rice paddies. Well, they're already moved 150 miles over and raiding other villages. And this is the truth as to why our greatest general of World War II was taken out of the combat in Vietnam or in Korea by Truman. Because he had decided all by himself that he knew what was going on, and he decided to carry out a military operation separate from the United Nations. And they fired him. Truman fired him. Well, these are just a little of the things that are going on that we should know about. But this is modern day. This is in America, something that you can lay your hands on right now. You can receive documentation. You can see that something's wrong in America. But where did it start from? Can we go back and trace the movements of all of these activities? Can we find out who these individuals are who's doing all this? And as a direct result, watch their activities as they're bringing about a world government. Mr. Harry Kahn wrote a book called The Four Trojan Horses. He stated within that our official defense policies, presuppositions, are all totally wrong. He says that the Russians are going after world domination as they always have, and not the way that our leaders are making us think. That they have never changed their goal of global domination. He also charges that our leaders in government in Washington, D.C. in 1984, today, have deliberately eliminated our military superiority and deliberately build up the Russians so that they could scare the rest of the world into a world government. Now, these are heavy charges, and yet he documents all of it. To be exact, he goes on to show that they are wanting an integration of the Soviet Union and the United States into a one-world federation, a loosely knit Soviet New World Order by the 1990s. Well, the reason they're doing this, they're building up Russia so that they can use nuclear blackmail to force us to submit into a world government. And they're hiding behind the word détente. We talk while they're building them up, and every single head of the Defense Department and the military in the United States since Truman's administration have kept our military going downhill. They've dismantled us to, at one time, half of our military apparatus, our nuclear weaponry, was in an inoperable position. And only since Reagan came back in have they started to build once again our defense forces. Well, we can all look and realize there is a pall of gloom just hanging over the United States. Everybody is in confusion. Everybody knows something's wrong, but nobody can lay a finger on it. Nobody can say, this is what's wrong, here it is, let's eliminate the problem or the cause, and therefore we'll solve the problem. Well, I believe firmly that there has to be a modern-day Paul Revere. Only this time, he's not going to come along saying, the British are coming. He's going to say the enemy is here. They've taken over the government of the United States. and that you are going to be merged into a one-world socialist communist government. And you're going to be involved in worshiping the beast. You're going to be involved in an economic system that'll bring you into total abject slavery, to where you'll be told every morsel of food that you can purchase for you and your family. You'll be told how many children you can have. And if you have more than that, you'll be penalized by the state. To be exact, it's going to be a government where they're going to blot out, if possible, 2/3 of the population of the United States and redistribute 1/3 on the farms to feed the rest of the world. So says the Club of Rome Global 2000 report. You see, these people who are heading up this push for a one-world government have Satan as their leading agent. Satan hates humanity because, you see, human beings were made in the very image of God. We are created to be born in the very God family and become sons and daughters of God. Satan was never given this opportunity, and he never will. Plus, he knows his ultimate fate. Matthew 25:41 says very clearly, the lake of fire was going to be created specifically for the devil and his angels, and it's going to destroy them. He knows he's going to be destroyed. But see, he wants you to think that we're going to be destroyed. Oh no, our potential as sons and daughters of God to live forever. God wants to give us immortality. And only the God family has immortality. But Satan doesn't have it. He only has everlasting life, which is given to him unless he rebels against God. And you see, if God wants to destroy his creation, he can destroy it. And that's why it says in Matthew 25:41 specifically, the one purpose that the lake of fire is created is for the devil and his angels. And then, of course, any other human beings who won't obey God and be converted to Jesus Christ will be an incidental byproduct in that lake of fire, and they'll burn up, and they'll become ashes under the feet of the saints. Well, let's go on, though. But there is something that's going on in the world that we all need to know. History will tell the story. International banking was started in the 1800s or the 1700s. There was a man by the name of Mayer Amschel Rothschild. He was born in 1743 in Germany, in Frankfurt, Germany. He died in 1812. This particular man had 5 sons, and they were very intellectual as far as the banking industry was concerned. And he started what's called international banking, not just a local bank house on the corner where people went and transacted and the bank kept their money or gold and so on. Well, he kept one of his own sons at their headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany. Then he sent sons to London, England, Paris, Vienna, and Naples in order to establish branch banks. And through these banks, he would get nations into debt to him through loaning money. And therefore, just as the common practice today, when a bank loans a large corporation money, one of their members of that bank will go sit on the board of directors of that corporation to guarantee that those companies have such policy to pay back the money. So it is that when someone loans money to a nation, they have to have a guarantee that it's going to be paid back. So they have someone who helps to formulate the policies of that nation. Now can you see why, after at least several generations, when they began to allow this international banking and loans to take place, and they got every nation in Europe indebted to them, why they could pull strings. If one nation would begin to step out of line, then another nation or a grouping of nations would, all of a sudden, a war would break out to bring that nation back into line. And in every war, and you can verify this by history, since 1694, every war that's been fought, always the losing nation has been the one who has been indebted to international bankers. Every time. There has been no exception. That tells a clue as to what's going on. Well, this man started international banking. But then also there was something else that took place. A man by the name of Adam Weishaupt, who was a Jesuit priest trained in the Catholic Church, and he was trained and he was a professor of canon law. And this man taught in Ingolstadt University. He became a Christian, supposedly. He became very disillusioned with the Catholic Church because of the way they carried on their activities. So he defected, and he became a representative in law to the banking house of the Rothschilds. And so he adopted what's called the Luciferian conspiracy. The Luciferian conspiracy, of course you recognize the name Lucifer immediately, because Lucifer is the one who rebelled against God. His name was changed to Satan, the adversary. You can look at that in Isaiah chapter 28 or 14, Ezekiel chapter 28. You can also verify it in Luke 10:18, where Christ said he saw Satan fall from heaven. And you see who fell in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. It was Lucifer. So anyway, this man became very involved with the money lenders, and he represented them. And he began to organize for the House of Rothschild what's called, in the modern day language, the Protocols, which is a written assembly of notes and plans by which this, and I call it the synagogue of Satan, because the Bible calls it that in two different places, would usurp authority over every nation on earth. They would infiltrate from within every position, government, educational positions, industry, religion, every facet of society. They would infiltrate and bring down every government on earth so that they could create a new world order. Well, this particular order, called the Order of the Illuminati, was started on May 1st, 1776. And on college campuses, and this is it's very disturbing to me. I went to college back in the late 50s and early 60s. And on the college campus where I went, they had what they call May Day activities. Every May 1st, they were actually celebrating the creation of the Illuminati without even knowing it. They carried out the exact same programs that are carried out every May 1st in Russia and every communist country. And this was a Christian college. And that's very disturbing when you see how completely they have infiltrated into what's called the modern Christian world. Well, anyway, Mr. Weishaupt completed his plan. He officially organized the Illuminati. He put it into existence. It was actually organized to destroy all existing governments and religions, all of them, and bring them to the ground. Well, they had various ways of doing this. One of the ways was to infiltrate every strata of society. As a direct result of infiltrating, they would bring up issues such as, I'll give an example, such as a church organization. A member of the Illuminati would work their way in over a long period of time, and then suddenly he would come up with a new truth out of the Bible, and he would split that church group. And then someone would infiltrate into each of those and split it further and further and further, until the total unified power of Christendom would be broken down, where there would be no opposition to those who had a plan of total world takeover. Well, they had other ways of this global takeover. Number one, this is just one of the ways, was to use money and sex bribery in order to control men in high places. Now, this sounds fantastic. To be exact, this sounds more like a fictionalized story that someone makes up. And yet, everything I'm saying to you can be found today in the British Museum in London, England. It's there. You can actually go see a copy of what's called the Protocols, where all of this is laid out in London, England right now. And I have an entire book of the manuscript of that document. Anyway, they were to infiltrate and level all governments. And it would take time. It would take over a period of time. They would use blackmail on these officials in order to get every government on earth in debt. What do you see in 1983? What was the big headlines all over newspapers? Brazil's in debt. Every South American country was about to collapse economically because they owe who? International bankers. The United States of America. What is a national debt? Do we really know what a national debt is? There would be no debt if our Congress coined our money and regulated the value of it, because that's what the Constitution says. then we make our own money. We don't owe anybody. But when an international banker called the Federal Reserve System, which 8 international banking companies control all stock in it, suddenly they create the money, they loan it, and we print bonds, interest-bearing bonds, and give these bonds to the Federal Reserve, guaranteeing we'll pay them all the money back that they've printed for us at 2 cents a sheet. Whether it's a $10,000 bill, a $1,000 bill, or a $1 bill. 2 to 2.5 cents is all it costs per bill to print. They loan it to us, then we have to pay them back with interest. Now you figure it out. They did it hundreds of years ago. How can you pay back $1 million that you've borrowed when that's all the money there is? But you've got to pay that whole million back plus the interest. You can't do it. It's impossible. It's a deliberate design to destroy the economy of every nation on earth at the same time, total economic collapse. Therefore, the introduction of a new world order economic system. Another point that they wanted to accomplish was to infiltrate the faculties of colleges and universities so that they could cultivate new students into their way of thinking. They were to actually eliminate from all society religion, and they were to do it through laws passed through the various governments in which they have infiltrated. What do we see in 1983 and 1984? What do we see the President of the United States crying out for right now? A constitutional amendment to bring back prayer in our schools. Now you can go to any college or university you want to. You can talk about gay rights. You can talk about lesbian rights. You can talk about women's rights. You can talk about the overthrow of the United States of America with the international socialist communist movement. You can talk about fascism, but you can't talk about God. Now, think about that a minute. We don't need a constitutional amendment. We've got it, the first one, that guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of religion. But you see, one of the points also in this is that they want to censor every speech that would betray them or portray God. Because you raise a generation of people without God, and what does God say in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28? If you obey my voice, I'll make you ride on the high places of the earth. But if you disobey me and you break my commandments, my statutes, and my judgments, he told a whole list of cursings that would come upon those nations that did that. And of course he was specifically talking to Israel, but it's God's laws for all mankind. He was just talking to Israel and giving Israel their Bible and their laws. But anyone else who lives by it, they're going to be blessed or else cursed by it at the same time. So you can see that these people, because you see Satan knows the Bible, so he can take the truth of God and twist it to fit his own purpose. And so he has taken the greatest Christian in the world, Christian nation in the world. Think about this. The nation that's gone to every land in the world. They preached Israel's God. They preached Israel's Messiah. And yet the very Satan who is listed and exposed in that Bible as the enemy of mankind is the very one who's taking the same laws of God and twisting them so that you and I won't keep them, and therefore the curse will come upon us and we'll be destroyed as a nation and sifted all over the world. And that's exactly what's taking place. Well, they also have colleges of their own through which they literally train their own Illuminati personnel. They train their own lawyers to create laws and introduce them into the Congress of the United States. England has already become a socialist country. Do you realize government owns all business over there with few exceptions? Very few exceptions. Well, they have their own schools, and there are some very notable people in the United States of America who have graduated from them. I won't mention them on tape, but we will print them in our magazine. But 3 of their schools, one of them is found in Gordonstown, Scotland. Another one is Salome in Germany. And another one is Anabrita in Greece. That's the 3 that are well known. And they turn out people to become direct agents for the New World Order. Now, Prince Philip actually graduated from Gordonstown in Scotland. He happens to be the husband of Queen Elizabeth of England. Lord Louis Mountbatten, who happened to be head of all the military personnel, he was blown up in a ship in the canal over there recently too, in the last couple of years, because he was speaking out, and it was very alarming to those who are a part of the New World Order. He was telling it like it was and exposing them, and suddenly a ship blew up and he was on it. Accidents happen, you know, unless you begin to expose those who are creating this New World Order. But these people in the Illuminati, they had other ways in which they were going to create their policies. And one of the very vital directives of Adam Weishaupt's plan was to secure absolute control of the press. You see, when Adam Weishaupt laid down this blueprint, there was only the printing press and newspapers. There was no such thing as radio, television, satellite. There was none of these activities going on. They hadn't been discovered. Well, by the middle of the 1930s, the United States of America had been taken over totally. Another part of the program was that they would take over all movie-making apparatus, all magazines, and that they would suddenly begin to barrage the public with magazines that would destroy morality. What have we seen since the word censorship has been taken out in America? We've seen at least 110 pornographic magazines. That's just exposing the female body. That's not even talking about the ones that have homosexuality, or men and women together, or group sex. That's just women magazines only. And it's all for one purpose, to create lust, because lust is breaking one of the laws of God, the 10th commandment, you shall not covet. Well, international banking firms that became a part of this, such as Lehman's, Kuhn Loeb, bought out, well, Goldman Sachs is another one, bought out all of the movie theaters or the production lots out in Hollywood, and they owned completely and totally all movies that are now being produced. They also own every major chain of newspapers, metropolitan newspapers in the United States of America. All of them. The Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the Des Moines Register, all of them. Every single one of them. They also own absolute and outright all three of the major news-gathering agencies of the world. The Associated Press, the United Press, and Reuters Press. All three of them are totally owned and controlled by those who have been educated into the new one world order. Well, I think what we ought to do, I'm going to have to skip a great deal of information that I wanted to give to you. But I want to get into modern day America today. And I think when you hear what I have to say, you're going to see exactly what's taking place in America. You can look at it and you can analyze it for yourself, and you can pinpoint what's wrong with the United States, why we don't have the freedom we used to have. Have you ever heard of two organizations, one of them called the Council on Foreign Relations, the other one the Trilateral Commission? Both of these organizations are practically unheard of in America. To be exact, the Council on Foreign Relations has only appeared in print in a major newspaper chain twice since 1919, when it became a reality in the United States. Trilateral Commission has not even been heard of in the major presses. Only once has the name Commission on Foreign Relations ever appeared on television in the United States. And yet I'm going to show you that people who are a part of this Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission totally control and dominate thoroughly the government of the United States. And they must control completely the press, the television networks, and the news gathering agencies, or else we would have heard of these agencies. Okay, now let's see and get a little background. The Council on Foreign Relations was incorporated in the United States in 1921. Now, a direct agent of the House of Rothschild and the international bankers is the man who started it. It's a private group that's headquartered, and I'll give you the address in just a little bit, so that if you want to write to it to verify that it exists, You could even call it. I have their telephone number. I'll give it to you. But anyway, it's located at the corner of Park Avenue and 68th Street in New York City. And it's in a building that was donated by the Rockefeller family in 1929, and it's been housed there ever since. But the Council on Foreign Relations founder was Mr. Edward Mandell House. He was a colonel. They called him Colonel House. He was the chief advisor of President Woodrow Wilson. Now, you have to understand this. Two of the planks to the Communist Manifesto in order to take over any government in the world. Number one was to have a law where you would have a graduated income tax. So the more money you made, the more you had to give in taxes, and that reduced your standard of living. It's called redistribution of the wealth, one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto. Secondly, you had to have a state bank. It had to be totally controlled. It would be an independent corporation, which the Federal Reserve System is. I've got a picture of the corporate seal. No government agency has a corporate seal. They're not corporations. And yet the Federal Reserve System has a corporate seal. But it's controlled by international bankers, and I have the names of the 8 international banking houses that totally own it and control it. Now, Mr. Mandell House was the advisor. He was a very prominent man who was sent to totally dominate the presidency of Woodrow Wilson. Mr. Woodrow Wilson actually referred to Edward Mandell House as his alter ego. Every decision made in the Wilson administration was made by Mandell House. No one else made a decision. He made it. Everywhere you see a picture of Woodrow Wilson, there's Edward Mandell House right over his shoulder. Never once will you see a picture unless it was a portrait made in private. I'm talking about an official government picture. Will you see one without the other? In 1913, something very strange happened. But before I tell you that, I want to go back and tell you about a book that was put out. And it became so sensational in the United States that it was withdrawn, and there has never been another printing of it. Edward Mandell House wrote a book called Philip Drew Administrator, and he laid bare the entire socialist dream of Karl Marx, which was nothing more. Karl Marx was paid by the House of Rothschild to bring up to date Adam Weishaupt's program for world government. The original edition did not carry the author's name, but by the very words in it you could tell who it was, Edward Mandell House. He made the entire picture so clear that you knew he was working for the dismantling of America. In this book, Philip Drew Administrator, House laid out what was called a fictional conquest of the United States. He told of a conspiracy that was at work that would gain control of both the Democratic and the Republican parties, both of them, and that they would use both of them as an instrument for a socialistic world government to overthrow America, so that no matter which candidate for presidency was put up, it would be their man. So that he would institute and he would fill in all the cabinet posts, his own advisors who had the same purposes in mind, destruction of the United States. This book called for the passage of a graduated income tax and for the establishment of a state-controlled central bank as the first 2 steps toward the goal of destruction of the United States. Now, this was in 1912 when this book was written. In 1913, the first of these 2 plans was made official. Within a month after Woodrow Wilson became President of the United States, in February of 1913, the graduated income tax was passed into law in the United States. Now, on December 23rd of that same year, 1913, when most of Congress was wanting to get away because of the Christmas holidays, they ran through a bill which only 2 men even read, Louis McFadden and Lindbergh Sr., Charles Lindbergh Sr. Both of those men said it was the most vile system that could ever be heaved upon the shoulders of a nation. And they stood up and objected to it. All the rest voted it into existence, and the Federal Reserve Act became reality. And a state-controlled bank came into being. only it was not controlled by the state in that only the president appointed a 7-member board to it, the Federal Reserve Board, one new member each year for 7 years. But then the stock was owned by private international banking firms. In 1919, the Federal Reserve System was conceived, and it actually was nothing more than a sphere of influence from England, the Royal Institute for Foreign Affairs. It's a part of the Round Table Group. And in London, England is where all of this world global conquest is being administered from right now. And in 1921, House incorporated the Council on Foreign Relations. But he happened to have died. But he had already begun to make inroads into who was being put up as the President of the United States. By 1944, he had died. But each of the people who became presidential candidates were members of the CFR. Roosevelt was then elected. And what happened? Roosevelt was nothing more than a socialist. Because what did he do? He offered everybody a chicken in every pot. He said, we've got a new deal for you, a new socialistic form of government. And so we started down the road to socialism. He was the #1 man that started us down the road. And he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, we've had other people. And I'll show you a chart when we're through of all the people who are a part of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission today. And it's going to shock you. But remember now, another part of the Council on Foreign Relations now, and this New World Order, was to take control of all vital processes in America. Okay, and one of that is the running of such national television networks now as NBC, CBS, ABC. I have the names of all the people who are on the board of directors who are members of this organization. So then you can understand why international socialism and communism is never portrayed in a bad light. And yet we always see how the United States pulls out of Lebanon, how the United States troops are blown up, how we pull out of Vietnam, how we pull out of Korea, how the United States and America is never shown in a good light. Check your news media sometime. Well, when you see the list of all those correspondents who nightly give the news on NBC, ABC, and CBS, and you see they're a member of this organization, then you begin to understand what's going on. They also control completely the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Des Moines Register. I've already mentioned those. They also control Time, Newsweek, Fortune, Business Week. All of these are publications by people who are a part of the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, I think we should take a look at the 1978 list of members of the Council on Foreign Relations, their annual report. This organization listed 1,878 members. Now, when you read this particular list, it reads like the who's who in America. And at the very top, as the board of directors, the head of the board of directors is David Rockefeller. 11 of these CFR members are senators, and you'd recognize most of their names. But many, many more are members of the House. Remember, you have a lot of members of the House, over 400. And you can see from all of this annual report, there's 284 of these members are U.S. government officials. I don't mean elected officials. I mean those bureaucrats who are placed into office by those who are elected. And then they stay into office over a period of years. So they continue to pass legislation toward their socialistic reforms. On this list also, there's 171 journalists, correspondents, communication executives, and all the major networks, and all the news gathering agencies, all a part of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. In fact, the reason most Americans have never heard of this organization is that when a person comes into it and they're invited to come, they have to swear that they will never mention what's talked about in the closed rooms outside of that room. They swear it. This is what you call a secret society. They say they're nothing more than a group who gets together, a group of intellectuals, to look at the world's problems and make recommendations. But it's inevitably true. Every time they make a recommendation, and it comes out in their particular booklet that they put out called Foreign Affairs, every single time within 4 years, their recommendation becomes law in the United States of America. Every time, it never fails. Richard Nixon wrote an article telling about how Red China should be accepted in the United Nations organization, how we should have open trade. Suddenly, Richard Nixon becomes President of the United States. And who was it that opened the doors to bringing Red China into the United Nations and putting Taiwan out? Richard Nixon. Well, it's just not by coincidence. In other words, you can take a look at all of the suggestions of this group. You know, 1 or 2 of them should be for the good of our nation if they were for our nation. But when every single one of these decisions, and then it's implemented as a government policy, hurts the sovereignty of the United States, something must be wrong. I believe we can all come to that conclusion when you've studied it enough. Well, I want to give just a little more information about this Trilateral Commission that has come into being since 1973. The Trilateral Commission actually was started by a man's name, Zbigniew Brzezinski. Anybody ever heard of Zbigniew Brzezinski? He happened to have been the security advisor for Jimmy Carter. Mr. Brzezinski wrote a book, and it was called Between Two Ages. This is quite a large book. He wrote it in 1970. And Between Two Ages meant that the United States has a constitution, but it's now obsolete. The New World Order is going to be a socialistic government, and it's going to be a world government, and that the United States had to be dissolved, and our Constitution should be dissolved by its 200th anniversary. When is that? 1789? Add 200 years? 1989? He said it should be dissolved by that time. Well, David Rockefeller happened to have read this particular book. And I want to give a few quotes from it. And then you make up your own mind as to whether this man is saying that the United States of America needs to be dissolved into a world government. On page 72 of that book, he writes, Marxism is simultaneously a victory. This is Marxism now. It's a victory. It's not a threat to our freedom. It's a victory for the world. Well, let's go on to page 83. He says, Marxism, disseminated on the popular level in the form of communism, represented a major advance in man's ability to conceptualize his relationship to his world. How much clearer can he be? He's stating that communism and socialism and Marxism is the wave of the future. He's for it, and it's the only logical alternative for a world in turmoil. Page 123. He says, Marxism supplied the best available insight into contemporary or modern reality. This man happened to have been the #1 security advisor in the United States of America, a Marxist. Now, he goes on and shows how Marxism in the form of communism, he praises it. But now, he never writes one single word showing how Marxism and socialism has murdered over 100 million people in Russia, in China, and in Vietnam, and they have been systematically using nerve gas to destroy whole populations who resisted the communist takeover in Vietnam. He never portrays that, not once. And he goes on to say that our Constitution is obsolete and needs to be changed. Now, we need to understand something. Once all of this has been read by David Rockefeller, Mr. Rockefeller went to a former governor of Georgia, who was not a very prominent man, But he had one thing in common with the mainstream of America. He was, quote, a born-again Christian. And everybody in America knew something was wrong, and they wanted to go to the polls and vote in a president who would take care of the problems. Who could you trust? Surely you can trust a born-again Christian. Well, David Rockefeller went to Mr. Brzezinski, and then he went to Mr. Carter. He offered Mr. Carter the opportunity to be one of the three founders of the Trilateral Commission. And then they handpicked a series of about 280 people who are the elite of the United States and Europe and Japan. And he wanted to make a Trilateral Commission because it would be the Western world industrialize Europe, the United States, and Japan, the three most industrialized areas of the world. And within a few years, they wanted to create a loosely knit socialistic world order. So in 1973, the Trilateral Commission was formed. And suddenly, all over, when the presidential race was going to be run in 1976, leading up to that was pictures in every newspaper, major chain where there was a Trilateral Commission or a Commission on Foreign Relations control paper, was giving Mr. Carter free publicity everywhere, and it always showed him smiling and talked about how he was a born-again Christian. Well, I don't doubt that at all. But unfortunately, this organization, once again, and I want to quote from it, Mr. Carter later said, membership on this commission has provided me with a splendid learning opportunity, and many of the members have helped me in my study of foreign affairs. Well, I have to question his intelligent response to those who put him in as president. Because when you take a look at those that he put in as his advisors and so on, we'll have to see that every one of these people were Commission on Foreign Relations or Trilateral Commission people. Every one of them working for a new world order. Now, I better retract that. Every one of them are not working for a new world order. Some of these people actually are invited, and it's maybe for prestige. And other people of influence are there, so they become a part of it too. So you have to look at their votes in Congress to see whether they're voting socialist every time, or their activities in working toward international trade rather than the benefit of the United States and protecting our goods against foreign goods. Well, anyway, this has been a very dramatic turn of events for the United States, because the old Illuminati, way back in 1776, stated they would penetrate every avenue in the United States, or every government in the world. Government, and they've done it. And I'm going to just give you just a summary, right quick, of some of the people, I'm not going to name them, I'll let you see it personally afterward. CBS Radio has 20 people who are members on the Council on Foreign Relations. NBC, which is owned by RCA, has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, either Council on Foreign Relations or Trilateral Commission. ABC only has 8. Cable News Network, 1. Public Broadcast Service, 5. Associated Press, 5. UPI, 1. Reuters Press, 1. The Boston Globe newspaper, 1. The Los Angeles Times Syndicate, which publishes many newspapers, 1. The Baltimore Sun, 1. And in each case, it's the top man who makes all the decisions. The New York Times has a list so long I won't even count them. Time Incorporated, about 7 or 8. Newsweek, which is owned by the Washington Post, has about the same number as the New York Times. The Dow Jones Industrial puts out the Wall Street Journal, 2, 4, 6, 7, who are members of the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. The National Review, 2. Now, listen to this. You wonder why there is a conspiracy in the United States to drive up oil prices? You wonder why our prices of natural gas for heating your home has gone up so high? Well, I'm going to do a tape interview with Mr. Lindsey Williams. who happens to have been in the oil fields. It's going to be a telephone interview, 2 half-hour programs. He was there. He saw all the documents of Arco Corporation. He was given unlimited access to their files, and he has all the documentation. The United States government actually told Arco to cap the greatest oil find in American history on the North Slopes of Alaska, Gull Island. And they said, it is so confidential and top secret, you can't even tell your employees about it, other than the ones that were working on the rigs that dug the wells. They capped it. There was enough oil, and there's proof there, and this is a top man, executive working for Arco, that said there was enough oil at present day consumption for gasoline to last 200 years from that one well. And there's enough natural gas to last for 1,000 years, and we could be driving gas at 43 cents a gallon. And our heating costs would be 1/3, and yet they will not allow that to be pumped. Also, the head of Arco that gave this interview to Lindsey Williams said that this was 5 years before it happened, that the federal government was going to break down AT&T and declare it a monopoly so that our phone bill would double and triple, and the people of the United States would cry out because of high gasoline, high heating costs, and high telephone costs for the government to socialize those industries. What are we having? Government control in the hands of a few. What have we seen now in 1983? The government sued AT&T. They're broken down starting in January 1984. This was in 1975 when he said that, 9 years before. Oh yes, there's things happening in this country, and it's bringing about the merging of the United States into a one-world socialist communist government, just like the book of Revelation states. I could go on with so many other names, but the United States military, just name after name that are a part of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, get this. Our National Security Council, National Security Advisor under Mr. Ronald Reagan today, and I won't call these people by name, he happens to be a member of the CFR. The Vice President of the United States, both the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission were one gunshot away from their man in the presidency. The Secretary of State, one resigned in 1983, and the man who took over, both a part of the same organization. The Secretary of Defense presently, the chairman of the Chief Joints of Staff over the military, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, all a member of these organizations, the head of the United States Tax Court, the Federal Communications System, or Commission, the Civil Aeronautics Board, the head of it is a member of this organization, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the head of it is a CFR member, the head of the Postal Rate Commission. I will mention one man, Mr. Henry Kissinger, who has no official position in the government, but he is now presently advising Mr. Ronald Reagan. The Deputy Director of the CIA is a member of this organization. The Assistant to the Secretary of the Interior. All these names was taken off the list from their own publication, the Council on Foreign Relations. And I could go on and talk about the Department of State in the United States, the Bureau of Internal Affairs, American Affairs. We could go on and talk about the Bureau of African Affairs, the Asian and Pacific Affairs, all of them. Every one of them are members of this organization. And this organization has published aims of a one-world socialist government. With all of these people in our government in complete and total control, no wonder we say you can't fight City Hall. So what I want to say in closing tonight, I believe that every one of us better get our lives straight with Jesus Christ. We had better recognize that there is a beast power coming. And in Revelation chapter 17, I think this is very interesting because it mentions that at the very end of this age, when Jesus Christ would come and he would fight 10 global groupings, and we're going to see that. But in Revelation 17, it talks about a great false church that rides, verse 4, or verse 3, So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman, this is a great false church, sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. What is scarlet? It's red. What is communism called today? Red. Why hasn't it dawned on us before? The very global grouping, the empire that's going around the world is communism. And it's called Reds. And here right in the Bible it says the beast, the political entity, is called a scarlet-colored beast. Well, let's go on down though to verse 12. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. 10 kings which have not received a kingdom as yet, but will receive power as kings 1 hour with a beast. Verse 13. So here's 10 kings that are going to receive power just a short period of time with this end-time beast system. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These 10 kings shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he's King of kings and Lord of lords. And they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. But what I want to show you is that this is already worked out. Right here I'm holding before you is a picture of the entire world. They have already divided the world up into 10 global groupings. And you wonder why in Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, 44, and 45, it talks about these 10 toes that are going to be these 10 kingdoms. It talks about some are brittle, some are strong. Like, clay and iron doesn't mix. And you know what? They have already broken down the 10 global groupings, the whole world. 4 of those groups are the industrialized nations of the world. And the other 6 are the 3rd and 4th world nations, the poor economically of the world. No wonder it said the 10 kings or 10 kingdoms would be partly brittle and partly strong economically. And I give in Newswatch magazine, this is the March, April of 1984, all of the 10 global groupings and list every single nation on the face of the earth and which grouping they have already broken it down into. And all this came from the regionalized and adaptive model of the global world system, the strategic or the strategy for survival project of the Club of Rome. And there are 6 basic organizations which all other organizations in the world spread out from. Those 6 are the Royal Institute for International Affairs in Britain, the Club of Rome in Italy, the Bilderberger Group, which heads up the common market in Europe, then the United Nations Organization, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission. And it's from those 6 organizations that they're actually infiltrating every segment of governments on earth, religion, every segment of society totally. That's why the book of Revelation says, and this will be my closing thought, that's why it says in chapter 13, verse 1, I stood upon the sea of the sand of the sea, and he saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And chapter 17, verse 15 says very clearly that that sea is all of humanity, every tribe, language, and nation on earth. And so truly it is going to be a global government. But Jesus Christ is going to return to destroy it. And you see, those who are going to be caught up with Jesus when he comes after the tribulation period are going to return, and they're going to actually help to smash this end-time global government. And if you are a true, sincere Christian, and you are going to be with Jesus Christ, then you are going to have the privilege to rid the earth of those who are destroying it today. Let's be one of those.